Africa is often described as the cradle of humanity, a continent rich in culture, tradition, and innovation. Yet, much of its historical grandeur has been overshadowed or overlooked in global discourse. The story of Africa's golden age is one of resilience, ingenuity, and power. During the medieval and early modern periods, Africa was home to a number of thriving empires, each governed by powerful kings and queens who oversaw complex societies, vast trade networks, and astonishing cultural achievements. The golden age of African empires was a time of political sophistication, architectural brilliance, and economic prosperity, a chapter in history that challenges many misconceptions about Africa's past. The rise of powerful African kingdoms can be traced back over a millennium. Among the earliest to emerge was the Kingdom of Ghana, not to be confused with the modern nation of the same name. Located in what is now southeastern Mauritania and western Mali, Ghana thrived between the 6th and 3rd. Its wealth was built primarily on the trade of gold and salt, two of the most valuable commodities in the ancient world. Ghana sat at the crossroads of trans-Saharan trade routes, which allowed it to flourish as a commercial hub. The King of Ghana, known as the Ghana, or war chief, controlled trade and ensured that gold dust was carefully regulated to maintain its value. The kingdom's capital, Kumbi Saleh, was a bustling city, divided into sections for local inhabitants and foreign merchants. This strategic urban planning highlights the kingdom's role as both a political and economic powerhouse. As the Ghana Empire declined, partly due to internal strife and pressure from expanding powers, the Mali Empire rose in its place. Founded in the 13th century by Sundiata Keita, Mali would become one of the most influential empires in African history. It reached its peak under the rule of Mansa Musa, perhaps the richest individual in human history. Mansa Musa's reign from 1312 to 1337 was marked by territorial expansion, administrative reforms, and an emphasis on education and culture. The empire extended from the Atlantic coast deep into the interior of West Africa. One of the most iconic legacies of Mansa Musa was the transformation of Timbuktu into a center of learning. Libraries and universities were established, attracting scholars from across Africa and the Mediterranean. Timbuktu's manuscripts, many of which survive today, cover subjects ranging from mathematics and astronomy to law and medicine. Trade continued to be the lifeblood of the Mali Empire. Gold, ivory, and kola nuts were exported, while textiles, horses, and salt were imported. The Niger River served as a vital artery for transportation and agriculture, binding the empire's various regions together. The administration of such a vast territory required a complex system of governance. Local rulers or chiefs were appointed to govern provinces, but remained loyal to the emperor. The empire's military strength ensured both internal stability and the protection of trade routes. Following the decline of Mali in the late 14th century, the Songhai Empire emerged as the dominant power in West Africa. Centered around the city of Gao, the Songhai Empire expanded rapidly under the leadership of Sunni Ali and later Askia Muhammad. Sunni Ali was a brilliant military strategist who extended the empire's borders through a series of conquests. He built a powerful navy that patrolled the Niger River and captured key cities, such as Timbuktu and Jenne, further strengthening Songhai's control over trade and education. Askia Muhammad, who took power in the late 15th century, continued to build on Sunni Ali's foundations. He established a centralized bureaucracy, standardized weights and measures, and reorganized the empire's taxation system. Under his leadership, Songhai became a well-governed and prosperous state. Like his predecessors, Askia Muhammad invested heavily in education, turning Timbuktu once again into a hub of intellectual activity. Foreign observers, including Moroccan travelers, marveled at the city's wealth and scholarly pursuits. While West Africa was flourishing, other regions of the continent were also witnessing the rise of powerful kingdoms. In East Africa, the Kingdom of Aksum had laid the groundwork for later empires with its control of Red Sea trade routes and its advanced architecture. Though Aksum's prominence faded by the 10th century, new states emerged along the Swahili coast. These city-states, including Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar, thrived on maritime trade across the Indian Ocean. They exchanged gold, ivory, and enslaved people for goods, such as porcelain, spices, and textiles from China, India, and Arabia. The Swahili city-states were cosmopolitan centers, blending African, Arab, and Persian influences in their language, architecture, and customs. To the south, the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe stood as a remarkable example of indigenous African achievement. Flourishing between the 11th and 15th centuries in modern-day Zimbabwe, The kingdom is best known for its stone city, Great Zimbabwe. Built without mortar, its massive walls and towers remain an architectural marvel. The city served as a political and religious center, as well as a trade hub linking the interior of Africa to coastal markets. Gold and cattle were central to the economy, and archaeological evidence suggests that the elites controlled long-distance trade networks that reached the Swahili coast and beyond. Farther west, the Kingdom of Benin, located in what is now southern Nigeria, gained renown for its artistic and political accomplishments. The kingdom was highly centralized, ruled by a king known as the Oba. Benin City, the capital, featured broad streets, massive walls, and complex administrative systems. What sets Benin apart in historical records is its extraordinary bronze and ivory artworks. These sculptures, often depicting royal figures and historical events, reveal a society deeply attuned to artistry, ritual, and governance. European visitors in the 15th and 16th centuries were astonished by the city's sophistication and urban planning. Equally impressive was the Kingdom of Congo, located in Central Africa. Emerging in the 14th century, it developed an organized political system, with provinces governed by appointed officials. The capital, Mansa, Congo, became a major urban center. The king, or Mani Congo, presided over a council of nobles and exercised control over trade, diplomacy, and military affairs. The kingdom's structure reveals a clear understanding of statecraft and central authority. In the Sahel region, the Kanem-Bornu Empire endured for over 1,000 years, beginning in the 9th century. With its heartland around Lake Chad, this empire was known for its cavalry, administrative structure, and scholarly tradition. It maintained extensive diplomatic and trade ties with North Africa and the Middle East. Kanem-Bornu's longevity testifies to its adaptability and governance. Across the continent, these kingdoms and empires demonstrated strikingly advanced systems of administration, economic organization, and cultural development. They managed large populations, built cities, maintained standing armies, and supported the arts and sciences. African rulers implemented tax systems, appointed governors, managed infrastructure, and sometimes even codified laws. Far from being isolated or primitive, African societies were deeply embedded in global networks of commerce and communication. The wealth of African empires was not merely material, it included intangible riches, such as oral histories, music, language, and spiritual practices. Griots, oral historians in West Africa, played a vital role in preserving collective memory, passing down stories of kings and lineages, battles and victories. Their traditions helped shape a shared identity and continuity across generations. This emphasis on oral tradition contributed to a dynamic, living history that still resonates today. European contact with these empires began as early as the 15th century. At first, it was largely diplomatic and commercial. European explorers and traders established relations with coastal kingdoms and marveled at their prosperity and governance. However, over time, these contacts would evolve into colonial ambitions, driven by greed and the desire for control. The narrative of African greatness was gradually distorted or erased by those who sought to dominate and exploit the continent. Yet, the ruins, manuscripts, artifacts, and oral histories remain as evidence of a glorious past. Understanding the golden age of African empires is essential for appreciating the complexity and richness of African civilizations. It challenges outdated stereotypes and reveals the continent as a place of innovation, leadership, and legacy. These kings and kingdoms were not isolated outposts. They were central players in global history. They built cities that rivaled those in Europe, led armies that expanded borders, and governed peoples through systems of law, diplomacy, and tradition. Their influence echoes today, not only in Africa, but across the world through the diaspora and the global cultural heritage. As we revisit the stories of the Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Benin, Great Zimbabwe, Congo, and other great African powers, we come face to face with a legacy that deserves celebration and deep study. The golden age of African empires is a chapter of world history that reminds us of the continent's enduring capacity for greatness and its rightful place in the global narrative. Africa was home to powerful empires with advanced political systems, trade networks, and urban centers long before European colonization. This historical reality stands in stark contrast to the widespread misconception that pre-colonial Africa was isolated undeveloped, or lacking in civilization. In truth, the African continent was a vibrant tapestry of kingdoms and empires that flourished through sophisticated forms of governance, economic innovation, and cultural development. From west to east, north to south, these African states rose independently, guided by their own systems of order, values, and leadership structures tailored to their geographical and cultural context. The political structures of many African empires were highly organized and hierarchical, often centered around a central ruler, such as a king, emperor, or chief, who governed through a council of elders, noble families, or appointed officials. These rulers did not operate in isolation. They relied on systems of checks and balances, taxation, regional governors, and legal codes to manage vast territory. For instance, in the Mali Empire, the emperor, known as the Mansa, delegated authority to provincial governors who oversaw local administration, justice, and trade, ensuring that the central government remained connected to distant regions. This level of administrative complexity reveals a deep understanding of statecraft, diplomacy, and long-term governance. Trade was the economic lifeblood of many African empires, and their strategic positions allowed them to control key trade routes that spanned the Sahara Desert, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic coast. The Ghana Empire, for example, amassed great wealth by taxing the trade of gold and salt moving through its territory. Gold mined in the forests of West Africa was exchanged for salt from the northern deserts, a vital resource in a region where food preservation and bodily health required sodium. In East Africa, the Swahili city-states like Kilwa, Sofala, and Mombasa thrived by serving as intermediaries in the Indian Ocean trade network, connecting African goods such as ivory, gold, and iron to merchants from Arabia, India, and even China. These networks made African kingdoms integral to global commerce long before European maritime dominance. Urban centers across the continent reflected the wealth and complexity of these societies. Cities like Timbuktu, Gao, Great Zimbabwe, and Benin City were more than just capitals. They were centers of culture, learning, architecture, and innovation. Timbuktu, for instance, became a beacon of scholarship in the Mali and Songhai empires, boasting libraries, universities, and thousands of handwritten manuscripts covering topics such as astronomy, law, mathematics, and medicine. Great Zimbabwe, with its massive stone enclosures and conical towers built without mortar, is a testament to architectural genius and organizational capacity. Benin City, famed for its bronze artwork and carefully planned layout, impressed even European visitors with its wide streets, fortified walls, and structured political system. These urban achievements were not isolated cases, but part of a broader pattern of urbanization in African history. The cities were often well integrated into their surrounding environments, relying on a mix of agriculture, craftsmanship, and trade to support dense population. They housed elite classes, artisans, scholars, traders, and common citizens who contributed to the cultural and economic vitality of their societies. In many cases, these cities had distinct neighborhoods for different professions or ethnic groups, as well as markets, workshops, and centers of governance. The existence of these powerful, organized, and wealthy African states long before European colonization refutes the idea that Africa had no history prior to foreign contact. These empires built their own systems of record-keeping, including oral traditions, court chronicles, stone inscriptions, and thousands of preserved manuscripts. Griots, West African oral historians, served as living archives of genealogies, state affairs, and epic histories, ensuring continuity of knowledge across generations. Their stories, passed down with precision and reverence, recorded the lives of kings, the rise and fall of dynasties, and the moral codes that shaped society. Africa's golden age of empires was also marked by its cultural richness and innovation. From the bronze sculptures of the Kingdom of Benin, to the stone architecture of Great Zimbabwe, and from the royal regalia of the Ashanti, to the intricate weaving and metalwork of Central African states, African creativity thrived in the service of both art and governance. Music, dance, language, fashion, and food all played essential roles in expressing identity, status, and collective memory. These cultural expressions were often tied to the political structure and rituals of leadership, demonstrating how deeply interwoven governance was with the arts and everyday life. Moreover, these African societies engaged in diplomacy, warfare, and statecraft with remarkable strategic acumen. Empires formed alliances, negotiated treaties, and conducted long-distance diplomacy. They maintained standing armies, developed espionage systems, and used both negotiation and conquest to expand or protect their borders. Military campaigns were often well-planned operations involving logistical coordination, riverine or desert navigation, and knowledge of terrain and climate. Leaders like Sundiata Keita of Mali, Suni Ali of Songhai, and Shaka Zulu of the Zulu Kingdom were not only warriors, but also nation builders who united fragmented territories into cohesive political entities. The idea that African societies only became politically or economically significant after European colonization is not only historically inaccurate, but also a harmful distortion. These empires existed on their own terms and timelines, with their own trajectories of growth, conflict, and transformation. They were active participants in shaping regional and global dynamics, not passive recipients of foreign influence. Even in moments of decline, their legacies endured in cultural practices, social organization, oral literature, and collective memory. The historical record shows that African civilizations were diverse, resilient, and advanced in multiple domains. Their cities rivaled those of Europe and Asia. Their rulers governed vast territories through complex systems. Their merchants dealt in goods that were sought after across continents. Their scholars contributed to human knowledge. Their builders and artists left behind structures and artworks that continue to inspire. This knowledge invites us to rethink history not through the narrow lens of colonialism or conquest, but through a fuller appreciation of human achievement in all its global diversity. By acknowledging the political, economic, and cultural sophistication of Africa's pre-colonial empires, we not only correct historical inaccuracies, but also empower future generations to see the continent's past with pride, clarity, and depth. Africa was not a blank canvas waiting to be drawn upon by outsiders. It was a continent of kings and kingdoms, cities and scholars, trade and tradition. Its golden age was not an exception, but a reflection of the enduring human capacity for greatness, innovation. Empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai dominated trans-Saharan trade routes and controlled the global gold and salt markets. Their strategic positions in West Africa allowed them to harness the economic power of the region's natural resources and use them to build strong political and cultural systems. These empires were not isolated or marginal to global history. They were central players in the international economic networks of their time. Their rise and dominance were directly tied to their ability to manage trade, protect key routes, and organize their societies around the movement of goods, people, and knowledge. The Ghana Empire, which emerged as early as the 6th century, was the first major West African state to capitalize on the wealth generated by the gold and salt trade. Situated between the gold-rich forests of present-day southern Mali and the salt mines of the Sahara Desert, Ghana became the middleman in a highly profitable commercial exchange. Traders from the north brought salt, cloth, and other goods, while the people of Ghana provided gold, ivory, and enslaved individuals. The rulers of Ghana taxed both sides of the transaction, generating immense wealth that allowed them to build strong armies and impose order across their territory. The capital city of Kumbi-Saleh became a thriving urban center with a dual city structure, one area for the indigenous population and another for Muslim traders from the north. This reflects the kingdom's openness to commerce and its role as a melting pot of cultures and ideas. As Ghana declined in the 11th and 12th centuries due to internal strife and external pressures, the Mali Empire rose to prominence in the 13th century. Founded by Sundiata Keita, Mali built upon Ghana's legacy, but expanded its reach dramatically. Under Sundiata's successors, especially Mansa Musa, the Mali Empire extended from the Atlantic Ocean to areas deep in the interior of West Africa. Like Ghana, Mali's strength rested on its control over trade routes and its abundant gold resources. The Bambukanbura goldfields were among the richest in the world, and Mali ensured that gold from these regions was transported through its territory and sold to North African merchants, who traveled in camel caravans across the Sahara. The Mali Empire's prosperity under Mansa Musa was so immense that it became legendary even beyond Africa. When Mansa Musa undertook his pilgrimage to Mecca in the 14th century, his entourage reportedly included thousands of attendants and camels laden with gold. According to several accounts, he distributed so much gold in Cairo that the value of the metal fell in Egypt and surrounding regions for years. This event signaled to the wider world that West Africa was not only wealthy, but also highly organized and capable of engaging with distant lands. Mansa Musa's investments in architecture, education, and urban development further demonstrate how economic wealth was used to build enduring cultural institutions. Cities such as Timbuktu and Gao flourished during this period, becoming centers of learning where scholars studied astronomy, mathematics, law and philosophy. Following Mali's decline in the late 14th century, the Songhai Empire emerged as the next dominant power in the region. Centered around the city of Gao on the Niger River, Songhai expanded aggressively under the leadership of Sunni Ali in the 15th century. A brilliant military commander, Sunni Ali captured key cities including Timbuktu and Jenne, consolidating the empire's hold on vital trade centers. The Niger River served as a crucial transportation route, allowing for the movement of goods, soldiers, and administrators. Trade continued to be the backbone of the Songhai economy, with gold and salt once again playing central roles. Songhai controlled the Saharan trade routes and maintained diplomatic and commercial links with North Africa, the Mediterranean world, and beyond. Under the rule of Askia Muhammad in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the Songhai Empire reached new heights. Askia reorganized the empire's administrative structure, standardized taxation, and built a professional army. Like Mansa Musa, he supported Islamic education and scholarship, which helped Timbuktu retain its reputation as a center of learning. However, Songhai's strength remained rooted in its ability to control trade routes and regulate the flow of precious goods. The empire established a system where merchants paid tolls and taxes at various points along their journeys, and in return the state provided protection and stability. This symbiotic relationship between merchants and the government ensured economic growth and political longevity. The trade networks that these empires relied on were part of a broader trans-Saharan system that linked sub-Saharan Africa with North Africa, the Middle East and Europe. Caravans carried gold, salt, ivory, cola nuts, textiles, leather goods, and enslaved people across thousands of kilometers. In exchange, African empires received horses, books, weapons, and luxury goods. These exchanges were not just about material wealth, they also facilitated the movement of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. As a result, West African societies became increasingly complex, literate, and cosmopolitan. The introduction of written scripts, architectural styles, and administrative techniques further illustrates the deep connections between African and global civilizations. The dominance of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai in the trans-Saharan trade was not simply the result of geographic luck. These empires developed sophisticated systems to manage and sustain commerce. They built infrastructure such as roads and rest stops, provided security for merchants, and regulated currency. Gold from West Africa became so integral to the Mediterranean and European economies that it helped fuel the economic expansion of entire regions. At their peak, these African empires contributed significantly to the global economy, influencing patterns of consumption, wealth accumulation, and trade policies. Their control over the gold and salt trade also allowed them to shape internal development. The wealth generated from trade funded architectural projects, educational institutions, and strong political institutions. The legacy of this era can still be seen in surviving manuscripts, oral traditions, ancient cities, and archaeological sites. It serves as a powerful reminder that Africa played a critical role in shaping early global systems of wealth and exchange. Understanding how empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai dominated the trans-Saharan trade routes and controlled global gold and salt markets offers not just a deeper appreciation of African history, but also a more accurate view of world history. These empires were not passive recipients of influence, but active agents of change, growth, and innovation. Their success demonstrates the strength of African leadership, the intelligence of African economic strategies, and the resilience of African societies across centuries. Leaders such as Mansa Musa and Askia Muhammad were not only powerful rulers, but also patrons of education, architecture, and the arts. Their leadership went far beyond conquest or the accumulation of wealth. They invested in knowledge, infrastructure, and the cultural growth of their societies, leaving legacies that deeply influenced African civilization and continue to be admired today. Their reigns represent some of the most remarkable periods in African history, where state power was used to build centers of learning, promote intellectual exchange, and support artistic expression in ways that rivaled any civilization of the time. Mansa Musa, who ruled the Mali Empire from 1312 to 1337, is often remembered as the richest man in history, but his impact was far more profound than just material wealth. One of his greatest contributions was his dedication to education and scholarship. During his reign, he transformed the city of Timbuktu into a major center of learning in Africa. He founded schools, libraries, and mosques, that attracted scholars from all over the Muslim world and beyond. The University of Sankore, located in Timbuktu, became a prestigious institution where students studied subjects such as law, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, grammar, and philosophy. These schools followed rigorous curricula and often produced scholars who went on to teach in other parts of Africa and the wider Islamic world. Mansa Musa also made a lasting impression through architecture. After his famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, during which he reportedly traveled with a massive entourage and distributed so much gold that it disrupted the economies of regions along his route, he returned to Mali with architects, artisans, and scholars. He commissioned the construction of grand mosques and public buildings, many of which were made using local materials like mud brick and incorporated West African architectural style. One of the most famous examples is the Jingue Mosque in Timbuktu, a structure that has stood for centuries as a symbol of Mali's golden age. These architectural projects were not just symbols of religious devotion, but also expressions of state power, cultural identity, and commitment to civic development. Beyond the physical buildings and institutions, Mansa Musa fostered a spirit of intellectual curiosity and openness. He encouraged the collection and copying of books, many of which were written in Arabic and covered a wide range of topics. This led to the growth of manuscript libraries in Timbuktu and surrounding cities. Some of these manuscripts still exist today, preserved in family collections and cultural archives, offering insights into the depth and diversity of African scholarly thought during the medieval period. Mansa Musa's reign demonstrated that African rulers could be not only military and economic leaders, but also visionaries who prioritized knowledge and culture. Similarly, Askia Muhammad of the Songhai Empire, who ruled from 1493 to 1520, after seizing power in a coup against the previous ruler, Askia Muhammad focused on consolidating and strengthening the empire through reforms that touched every aspect of society. He created a more efficient and centralized administration, appointed governors to oversee different provinces, and improved tax collection systems. These political reforms allowed the empire to support a flourishing cultural and educational scene. One of Askia Muhammad's most notable achievements was his support for scholarship and learning in Timbuktu. Like Mansa Musa, he invited scholars to his court, funded Islamic schools, and promoted the copying of books. The libraries of Timbuktu grew under his patronage, and the city became known as one of the great centers of learning in the world. Scholars studied and taught not only religious texts, but also science, history, geography, and literature. These schools operated with advanced systems of examination and certification, allowing students to gain recognition as learned individuals across the broader Islamic world. Education during this time was not limited to the elite. It was part of a broader societal value placed on knowledge and intellectual achievement. Askia Muhammad also invested in architecture as a way to express the grandeur and unity of the Songhai Empire. He sponsored the building of mosques, schools, and administrative centers in cities like Gao and Timbuktu. His architectural projects reflected a blend of local styles and broader Islamic influences, creating a unique visual language that emphasized the empire's identity and its place in a wider intellectual and cultural network. These structures served as more than places of worship. They were community centers, schools, and symbols of the state's strength and vision. The cultural and educational advances made under these rulers were not confined to a single generation. Their legacies shaped African societies for centuries. The schools, libraries, and manuscripts they supported helped to preserve a vast body of knowledge, much of which was written in Arabic, but often reflected African perspectives and experience. The respect for learning and scholarly debate became deeply embedded in West African traditions, influencing both secular and spiritual life. Even as the political power of the empires declined, the cultural and intellectual achievements remained, influencing neighboring regions and the African diaspora. Art was also a significant part of their legacy. Though many examples of traditional African art were not signed or attributed to specific artists, the production of art was a central component of court life and cultural identity. Rulers commissioned metalwork, textiles, wood carvings, and ceremonial regalia that reflected both spiritual beliefs and political authority. In places like Timbuktu and Gao, manuscripts were often beautifully decorated, and calligraphy was considered both a visual and intellectual art form. These expressions of creativity were supported and funded by the state, showing that the rulers saw the value in promoting artistic excellence alongside intellectual development. Both Mansa Musa and Askia Mohammed stand out in history, not simply because of the wealth or military success of their empires, but because of their forward-looking vision. They understood that true greatness required more than territory or riches. It required the cultivation of ideas, institutions, and cultural pride. Their reigns highlight the fact that African leadership during the Golden Age was often deeply committed to the flourishing of human potential. They created conditions under which knowledge could thrive, arts could flourish, and cities could become centers of global significance. Their contributions are part of a larger story of African civilizations that valued wisdom, creativity, and community. The empires they led remind us that Africa's history includes not just struggle and resistance, but also brilliance, innovation, and leadership in education and culture. The legacies of Mansa Musa and Askia Mohammed continue to inspire those seeking to reconnect with Africa's past and reclaim its rightful place in the story of world civilization. Cities like Timbuktu and Great Zimbabwe were intellectual, economic, and architectural marvels of their time, standing as enduring proof of Africa's sophisticated urban cultures during the continent's golden age of empires. These cities were not just political centers, they were living reflections of the societies that built them, societies deeply invested in knowledge, commerce, architecture, and cultural identity. While their geographical locations and cultural contexts were vastly different, both cities demonstrate the incredible range and richness of African civilization. They served as powerful symbols of human achievement and innovation, thriving in times when Africa was an integral part of global systems of trade, education, and art. Timbuktu, located in present-day Mali along the southern edge of the Sahara Desert, rose to prominence during the height of the Mali and Songhai empires. Its strategic location near the Niger River and along major trans-Saharan trade routes made it a natural hub for commerce, attracting traders from across North Africa and the Middle East. Gold, salt, ivory, and other valuable goods passed through Timbuktu, creating a flourishing economy that supported a vibrant urban life. But Timbuktu's true legacy was not just in its markets, it was in its knowledge. It became one of the most important centers of learning in the medieval world, often compared to cities like Baghdad, Cairo, or Cordoba. At the heart of Timbuktu's intellectual life were its universities and libraries. The University of Sankore, along with other schools, such as Sidi Yeha and Jingwaraba, attracted thousands of students and scholars from across West Africa and the wider Islamic world. The curriculum covered a wide range of disciplines, including theology, law, astronomy, mathematics, grammar, and medicine. These institutions operated under highly developed systems of education, with structured degrees, oral examinations, and scholarly debate. Students could study for years before earning the title of learned scholar, and many went on to teach in other cities or advise rulers. The scholars of Timbuktu were also prolific writers and copiers of books, contributing to the creation of one of the largest collections of African manuscripts ever assembled. These manuscripts, written primarily in Arabic and Ajami, African languages written in Arabic script, are a testament to the intellectual depth of the region. Many are beautifully decorated and written in calligraphy, covering not only religious topics, but also science, philosophy, ethics, and poetry. Families in Timbuktu safeguarded these manuscripts for generations, recognizing their value not just as texts, but as cultural treasure. Even today, ongoing efforts continue to preserve these works and study their contents, which offer insights into centuries of African thought, administration, and daily life. Timbuktu's architectural heritage was equally significant. The city's mosques and schools were constructed using local materials like mud brick, with designs adapted to the harsh desert environment. The Jingwaraba Mosque, built in the 14th century under the reign of Mansa Musa, is one of the most iconic examples of Sahelian architecture. It features massive walls, wooden beams that provide both decoration and structural support, and minarets shaped like pyramids. These buildings were not only places of worship and learning, but also architectural statements of pride and permanence. The city's layout, with its narrow alleys, courtyards, and communal spaces, reflected the social fabric of Timbuktu as a place where ideas were exchanged as freely as goods. In contrast, on the opposite side of the continent, Great Zimbabwe emerged as a monumental city-state in southern Africa, far from the trans-Saharan roots, yet equally dynamic and influential. It reached its height between the 11th and 15th centuries, and served as the capital of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe. Situated between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, Great Zimbabwe controlled a vast hinterland rich in gold and cattle. It also played a central role in regional trade networks, connecting the interior of Africa to coastal ports like Sofala and Kilwa on the Indian Ocean. From these ports, gold, iron and ivory from Great Zimbabwe were traded for goods from Arabia, India and China, including ceramics, beads and cloth. Archaeological findings at the site reveal the extent of this international exchange, with Chinese porcelain and Arab glassware discovered among the ruins. What truly sets Great Zimbabwe apart is its extraordinary stone architecture. Unlike many other African settlements of the time, Great Zimbabwe was built without mortar, using carefully carved granite blocks that were fitted together with incredible precision. The most famous structures are the hill complex, perched atop a rocky outcrop and likely used for religious or royal purposes, the Great Enclosure, a massive elliptical wall enclosing towers and smaller buildings, and the valley ruins, where commoners live. The Great Enclosure in particular stands out for its size, engineering, and symbolism. At over 250 meters in circumference and reaching up to 11 meters in height, it is the largest ancient stone structure in sub-Saharan Africa. The layout of Great Zimbabwe reflects a well-organized society with clear distinctions of status and function. The separation between royal or elite areas and the residential quarters of commoners indicates a class-based social structure. Evidence of iron smelting, weaving, pottery, and other crafts suggests that it was a bustling urban center, supported by skilled labor. The city's location was also strategically chosen to take advantage of nearby resources, including gold mines and fertile grazing land for cattle, which were central to the local economy and culture. While the precise reasons for the decline of Great Zimbabwe remain debated, factors such as environmental degradation, overpopulation, and the shifting of trade routes likely contributed. However, its influence lived on through successor states, such as the Mutapa and Razwi empires, which continued the traditions of stone building and regional trade. The cultural and political legacy of Great Zimbabwe can still be felt in the region today, and the ruins stand as a national symbol of pride in modern-day Zimbabwe. Both Timbuktu and Great Zimbabwe challenge the long-standing myths that Africa lacked urban centers, intellectual traditions, or monumental architecture before European contact. These cities prove that Africans were not only capable of building and governing sophisticated societies, but also of creating lasting cultural and architectural legacies. They were cities of vision, places where people gathered to learn, build, trade, and create. Their stories reveal a continent that was never cut off from the rest of the world, but rather fully engaged in the exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods. In different environments and under different circumstances, Africans used their knowledge and resources to build cities that were not only functional but also beautiful, symbolic, and intellectually alive. These cities deserve recognition, not as exceptions, but as examples of Africa's broader historical achievement.